Tonight, we begin with something that has not happened in Russia since 1917, something Vladimir Putin has spent his entire presidency trying to prevent, something that now threatens not only his war in Ukraine, but his grip on power itself, because for the first time in generations, Russian military officers are no longer obeying orders without question. They are no longer treating Putin's strategic decisions as inevitable, and they are no longer willing to lead their men into what they know is a meat grinder for objectives that cannot be achieved. This is not a coup, at least not yet, but it is something far more dangerous for Putin. It is the slow withdrawal of consent, the quiet refusal, the spreading realization among the men with guns that their commander-in-chief is leading Russia toward catastrophe, and that they, the generals, the colonels, the officers who have spent decades serving the state, might be the only ones capable of stopping it. And the trigger for this shift came when NATO declared it would treat any further Russian provocations as potential Article 5 violations, when Poland announced it would shoot down Russian aircraft without waiting for permission, and when Donald Trump himself confirmed that NATO would respond with lethal force, because at that exact moment, something snapped inside the Russian military command structure. Every officer with a map and a calculator reached the same terrifying conclusion. At the same time, Russia cannot fight NATO, not now, not with an army hollowed out by more than 70,000 desertions, not with soldiers who refuse to advance, because they would rather face a firing squad than one more drone strike, not with equipment where half is broken and the rest dates back to the 1980s. And yet, Putin keeps pushing, keeps testing, keeps ordering provocations that every general understands could spiral into the one war Russia absolutely cannot win. And so the officers began doing something they have never done before. They began saying no, not publicly, not loudly, but in the subtle ways modern militaries resist orders they know will destroy them. Delays in execution, misunderstandings about objectives, equipment failures that appear moments before planned operations, reconnaissance missions that somehow never quite locate the targets they were sent to find. Because this is how modern military rebellions begin. Not with tanks rolling through Moscow, but with 1,000 small refusals. With officers who nod in meetings and then simply do not do what they were told. With commanders who protect their men by quietly sabotaging missions that would kill them. With a general staff that begins operating as if presidential orders are suggestions rather than commands, and behind the walls of Russia's Ministry of Defense, this quiet resistance has already taken shape. Because in the last 6 weeks, 3 separate operations personally ordered by Putin did not happen. They were not cancelled. They were not postponed. They were simply allowed to die during the planning phase. One was meant to be a massive drone strike on Polish logistics hubs. Another involved electronic warfare, designed to jam NATO communications across the Baltic states. The third was a coordinated naval exercise that would have placed Russian submarines within striking distance of the undersea cables connecting Europe to North America. All 3 operations reached final planning stages. All 3 had resources allocated, units assigned, commanders designated, and all 3 suddenly encountered insurmountable obstacles that made execution impossible. Railways undergoing unexpected maintenance, specialized personnel suddenly unavailable due to illness, weather conditions that turned unfavorable and somehow remained that way for weeks. And this is not coincidence. This is institutional resistance. This is a military establishment that has decided it will no longer execute orders that could trigger Article 5 and destroy Russia. And Putin knows it. He knows his generals are slow-walking his directives. He knows his colonels are finding excuses to avoid implementing his strategies. He knows the chain of command he relied on for 25 years is corroding from the inside. What makes this moment truly explosive is that Putin cannot purge his officer corps. Not now. Not in the middle of a war. Because every general he arrests creates chaos in the command structure. Every colonel he replaces with a loyalist produces operational paralysis. And the Wagner mutiny already showed him what happens when military leadership is reorganized during active combat. Units become confused, authority becomes unclear, and suddenly armed groups answer to no one, which is far more dangerous than armed groups that answer slowly. And so Putin is trapped. He needs his military to carry out increasingly risky provocations against NATO, but his military has concluded those operations are suicidal and has begun the quiet revolt of simply not doing them. He cannot fire everyone without collapsing his war effort entirely, and he cannot back down without appearing weak, which in Putin's Russia is a death sentence for your political career and sometimes for your life. The split is not public yet. Generals are not holding press conferences, colonels are not writing open letters, but the evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. Orders are issued and not followed, directives are announced and quietly ignored. Aggressive new postures are declared, and then nothing happens. The gap between what the Kremlin says Russia will do and what the Russian military actually does has grown so large that Western intelligence agencies are struggling to determine who is truly in control. NATO understands this intelligence is detailed and specific. They know about the cancelled operations. They know about the resistance among mid-level officers. And they know that Putin's biggest strategic problem is no longer Ukrainian resistance, but Russian reluctance. And based on this reality, NATO is quietly recalibrating its entire approach, because if Russia's military will not follow orders to escalate, NATO can draw red lines more explicitly. Knowing the Russian military itself will act as an internal brake on Putin's aggression, the alliance is no longer just deterring Russia. It is benefiting from the fractures inside Russia's own military establishment that make Putin's most dangerous orders impossible to execute, creating a bizarre alignment of interests where NATO and the Russian General Staff both want to avoid Article 5 escalation. Both recognize that Putin's provocations are pushing toward catastrophic confrontation, and both understand that someone must stop Putin from stumbling into a war that would destroy Russia. And increasingly, Russian generals believe that someone has to be them. The historical parallels are chilling. In 1917, Russian generals lost faith in the Tsar's ability to win the war. They did not overthrow him immediately. They simply stopped implementing his orders effectively. They made decisions without consulting him. They operated as if his input was optional, and when revolution came, the military did not defend him. It stood aside and let history happen. Putin understands this history better than anyone. He has spent his career studying how power collapses, how states fall, how militaries withdraw support from leaders they no longer believe can protect the nation. And now he is seeing the warning signs firsthand, realizing that the very institution he built his power upon may be the one that refuses to follow him into the abyss. These officers are not liberals or Democrats. They are hardline nationalists who believe in a strong Russia. And that is exactly what makes them dangerous to Putin, because they have concluded that his strategy has failed, that his war in Ukraine is weakening rather than strengthening the military, and that his provocations against NATO threaten the survival of the Russian state itself. When career officers who have dedicated their lives to defending Russia decide their president is the greatest threat to Russia's future, the conditions for regime change exist